What's up, it's Marco, Sage Soccer, and today I'll be doing my preview of World Cup Group D. And in my opinion, this is the group of life. I think every team in this group has as good of a chance as they possibly could to qualify, and they even got a pretty good draw for the knockout round as well. I think this is a France team that is probably one of the lesser intimidating ones for group leaders. There's obviously the curse of champions, though I don't think you can really count on that. But despite being a world power, the world champions, France are dealing with a ton of injuries at the moment, which really lessens their potential as a squad. Then you have Denmark, who are a very good team that I think would get to the knockout run in just about any group. But they're not exactly the intimidating force that you could expect to see from some of the other powers from Pot 2. And then there's Tunisia and Australia, and listen, it is very tough to qualify for the World Cup, and just getting here is an achievement. But Tunisia barely qualified. They just beat out Equatorial Guinea in their group, and then beat Mali 1-0 to qualify. And Australia couldn't get out of their group in Asian qualifying and had to win on a shootout in order to qualify through the intercontinental qualifiers. And I really don't think that those two teams will pose much of a challenge to France or Denmark. I mean, anything's possible at the World Cup, but I think for a France team that's looking very beatable and is dealing with a ton of injuries, this is as good of a group as they could have gotten. This is a French team that is extremely talented, but beatable. They already looked weak in last year's Euros when they crashed out in the round of 16, and they have injuries piling up. Pogba, Kanté, Varane is not 100%. Their center back group as a whole is looking pretty weak right now, and Magnan, who probably should be their starting keeper over Lloris, is injured as well. Though France still has a great team. Benzema and Mbappe up front is the best strike force in the World Cup. Probably the best we've seen since 2002 Brazil. And the team's just full of Champions League players with a winning mentality. I think they are still a contender for the championship despite all their injuries, though they are pretty beatable and they do have holes in the squad. It appears France will be playing with a 3-4-1-2, a formation that I don't think it's the best out of their players. It's a pretty defensive formation, 5 defensive players, and then 2 midfielders who are going to be defensive as well. I think that they could afford to go with a more attacking setup, have a few dynamic wings in their team, but it should be said that when you have a front 3 as dangerous as France has, you can afford to have a more defensive team, and they do have a couple of good wingbacks who can get forward to provide support as well. But I'm not too sure about this formation. In goal will be Hugo Lloris. I already mentioned the injury to Magnan, and I'm not too sure about Lloris. He's obviously a very good goalkeeper, Champions League level player, and very good, maybe a little bit erratic, but I don't think he's ever been a world-class player. He's not going to be somebody who's going to be keeping France in games that they shouldn't be in. He's done a very good job for France and probably goes down as a legend for them. He's their captain, but he's not going to be as good as a Courtois or an Alisson like some of the other title contenders will have. So France's center backs are extremely tough to talk about because they are dealing with a lot of injuries at the moment, and there are very few players who should be in this team that are playing and healthy at the moment. But it should be said that even those players are extremely good. So ideally, France would have a back line of Raphael Varane, Lucas Hernandez, and maybe a Koundé, in my opinion. So, obviously you can argue that, if you want to put in Apacio or Pavard or Saliba, I think you have to listen to that argument. But I think Varane, just elite level player. We saw how good he was, just constantly winning titles at Real Madrid, part of that World Cup winning team, and you've got to keep him in the squad. Then Lucas Hernandez, left-footed center back. You want to have one of those in the team, and just overall another really solid player. And then you've got Koundé, who's been playing very well for Barcelona. So that's what I think I'd like to go with. The problem is Varane is injured. Lucas Hernandez isn't playing much at Bayern Munich. You have Koundé just picked up a knock. We're not sure how healthy he'll be. And when you look at the players who are both playing and playing well right now, You have Aponasio at Bayern Munich. You have Pavard at Bayern Munich. You have Saliba and Benoit Badiashile, who's been playing for Monaco and has actually had a couple of good games for France recently. And he is a left-footed player. So worst case scenario, you probably get Badiashile in there as well, who's very good on the ball. Not very mobile, but can be a very solid player for them. Saliba and let's say Aponasio, maybe put Pavard at right wing back, which again isn't ideal, but maybe that happens. Maybe you start Pavard over Saliba. Saliba didn't have a great performance for France recently. But out of those four, that's still an amazing back line. And the best back line in this group, I should say. Just a really solid group. So even worst case scenario, solid Champions League level defense. Best case scenario, world-class defense. And it's probably going to be a mix of them. I could see Koundé coming back really easily. Maybe they start to go far, Varane gets into the team. But even though they're dealing with a lot of injuries, I think France is going to be solid. Right wing back, you have Klose is probably going to be playing there. He can get up and down the field. Really good player. Not great, not a world-class guy. He's only going to provide so much of a level, but he can do a job. If you want to have a better player for a worse formation fit, you could put Pavard there at a right wing back. You could put Coman there as well. I'm not sure if that's ideal, but he can do a job there. I think Klose is the only real option that fits this team. I'd probably go back to a back four and put Pavard in the squad if I'm being realistic with it, but either way, it's not going to be a bad player. And left wing back is just amazing, but for a different reason. You have two healthy players who are in amazing form, in Ferland Mendy and Theo Hernandez. I think it's a real debate on who you go with. I think if it was a back four, I'd probably go with Mendy, but with it being a back three and attacking play being so valuable, I'd go with Theo Hernandez, but it's two great options that you can't have a wrong answer for. The center midfield will look very different for France. Blaise Matuidi has retired, and Pogba and Kanté are dealing with injuries. I think that really hurts their team. Pogba's played great for France, and Kanté, he has slowed down a little bit, but he's just a world-class defensive midfielder who plays so well for this national team. Tchouaméni will come in for him, who he's dealing with a knock right now, but he'll be fine. The Real Madrid signing has been great since he's arrived. Has replaced Casemiro extremely well, which I was not sure they'd be able to do for a very long time, let alone the first window. Just a solid defensive player, can keep France's defense protected in the midfield, and really good on the ball as well. Just looks like everything you'll need out of a defensive midfielder who Real Madrid made a great signing there. Alongside him, it's kind of tough to say. I think right now Adrien Rabiot is the best option. He's in pretty good form. I don't think it's ideal. I don't think you ever really get too excited to see Rabiot on the field. And I don't think he's ever really lit the world on fire, but he's helped Juventus a bit this season. He's coming in pretty good form and can do a job. Camavinga will be a great player, but I don't think he's ready just yet. Guendouzi could be another idea, but I expect to see Tchouaméni and Rabiot, and it's not exactly the best midfield for France. I actually think Denmark's got a better one, but when you have the front three that France does, I think it'll be okay. Up front will be Griezmann, Mbappe, and Benzema, and best in the world, I think, is an understatement. Griezmann plays that 10 role extremely well for France, can pop up with goals, combines well, he does everything you need. He's a borderline world-class player. I'd say he's at a Raheem Sterling's level, and just such a talented player. Then Mbappe, freak athlete, puts the ball in the back of net. We already saw him play great at World Cup previously, and he's only gotten better since then. A bit of issues at the club level right now with he probably doesn't want to be at PSG, but I don't think that'll stop him from playing well for France. And Benzema, Ballon d'Or winner, has been able to sacrifice his goals to help the team succeed when he was playing alongside Ronaldo, Gareth Bale, Isco. He can play this role in a front three extremely well. We've seen that before, and he's probably going to score as well. Just such an amazing group. I think they'll work well together. On top of that, Olivier Giroud comes off the bench as a physical presence, and if they want to switch the formation, Kingsley Coman would really help this team. I think he probably should be starting if they go to a back four. and just an amazing looking squad who, despite a couple of players who aren't like the greatest, like I think this team has a chance to win the World Cup. France have an extremely talented team with attacking talent that can take them far. I think the injuries hold them back from being a real tournament favorite, but despite that, I think they win the group pretty easily. I don't think Australia or Tunisia can trip them up. France is too good defensively and have too much firepower going forward. I really don't see a way that Australia or Tunisia stop France from scoring. In addition, I mean, I guess you'd say, oh, they have the curse of the champions, but I'm not going to make like a prediction based off of a curse. I could see Denmark defeating them, and I honestly think they will tie. Denmark has beaten them in the past, but I just look at Denmark's attack. I don't think it's by far not as good as France's, but I don't even think it's that great of an attack altogether, and I struggle to see them keeping pace with this French team. And even if they get that tie, I'm expecting Mbappe to get a hat trick against Australia or Tunisia, and I think they'll be able to top the group on goal difference. And should they win the group, they have a relatively easy knockout game against either Mexico or Poland, and following that will likely be a game against England. That's another very winnable game against an injury-ridden team. And then once they're in the semifinals, anything can happen. I'm not sure they really have a top 4 team this tournament, but I think their draw really helped them. And I think the semifinals could be their expectations, and I really think they have a chance to go far at this tournament. Denmark have made the knockout rounds the last few tournaments they've played in, and they should do so again in Qatar. This team has good players in every single position. In addition, they did beat France in September. But I don't think Denmark has the potential to win the tournament like France does. They have a pretty severe lack of star power. I don't think there's one world-class player in their team, and their attack doesn't really put fear into any opponents. They could easily win this group. France is beatable, as I said, but I don't think they're the favorites, and though I should say that I think they'll be able to handle Australia and Tunisia relatively easily. Denmark has been experimenting with the back 4, and they still have a back 3 that they could use. They did well with the Euro in that, but I think with Eriksen being back, they're probably going to go with the back 4. They can keep the ball in possession, but I think they tend to play defensively against more of the top teams. I do expect them to be able to attack Australia and Tunisia, but against France and once they get to the knockout rounds, I think they'll be playing a bit more defensively. Individually, I expect to see Kasper Schmeichel in goal. Things aren't going the best for him at Nice, but he's still a great shot stopper and amazing with the ball at his feet. I honestly put him at the same level as Hugo Lloris. I think they're as good as each other as players, and both of them could do very well for their teams. Both not world-class keepers, but can do a very good job. At center back, I expect to see Christensen and Joachim Andersen. Christensen's back from an injury now and will be playing. I think he brings great club pedigree and a winning mentality. We saw him win the Champions League for Chelsea. And while he's not a world-class player, he's solid all around and a very good defensive presence for them. Joachim Andersen's an amazing passer out of the back, constantly creating chances for Crystal Palace. He probably lacks the pace that you like to see, but in a team that plays defensively, he can do very well, and it's a very solid pairing for Denmark. Kjaer is another option. He should be back from injury. And Vestergaard as well, but I don't even think he makes the team. At right back, you have Christensen, who's been great for Leeds. I have to say again, not world-class, but solid all around. Good defensively, offers a lot going forward. Now, I don't see him like pocketing a Coman or an Mbappe, but he's a very good player. Solid defensively, can offer a bit going forward, tons of energy, and I think Denmark will feel confident with him at right back. Left back might be a bit of a weak spot. You have Joachim Mail. He's played very well for Atalanta in a wingback role, and he can do a job at a left back and a back 4, but it's not his natural position by any means. He is right-footed, and again, he's only so good as a player, and I think that this is a position where they might be able to be attacked, like especially if France put Mbappe out on the right, and he can dribble at him. Like, that could be dangerous. Maybe once you get to the knockout round, some other teams could do that. And they really lack a real solid true left back, but I think Mail will be able to do a job for them. Then we get to the midfield, which is Denmark's strength. Probably better than France's, especially given their injuries, and a really good group. You have Thomas Delaney in there, who has great defensive abilities, can shield the back line, still good on the ball. Højbjerg, who's been very good for Tottenham, more of an all-around player, good defensively, keeps the ball in possession, and is really one of the players that Tottenham should build around. He's probably the best player on the team at the current moment. And then Christian Eriksen, who he wants to make up for lost time. creative force, can really help keep the ball. Add a bit of defensive bite to his game at Manchester United, and I think he's a player who he might be able to make a difference for this Denmark team. I don't think he's world class, certainly not anymore, but you know that he can make an impact. Like, this is an elite midfield that I think can help them defeat France. It's going to be very tough to do that, but we saw what Croatia was able to do with an amazing midfield, despite a relatively lackluster supporting cast, and I think Denmark should be very excited about this part of their team. The attack is the weak point of the team, and there are some pretty good young players, but they're young players, and they're just good. Damsgaard had an amazing Euros, but he hasn't been able to keep that form going. And he's a good young player. He's only going to get better, but I don't think he takes them over the top. But he has done well for Denmark before. Then you have Andreas Skov Olsen, who's another good young player, a good lefty who can cut in and score, and he has made an impact in the Champions League. But again, he's still just a young player playing in Belgium. I don't think you can expect too much from him. Then you have Dolberg up top. Good target man with a lot of talent in him, but it's looking like he won't fulfill the potential that we saw in him when he was at Ajax. But I should say that's similar to Embolo for Switzerland, and he's been playing great, and I expect him to be a goal threat. So I think Dolberg could do well, but he has a ceiling as a player. Then you have Braithwaite or Cornelius who can come off the bench. Cornelius, just his physicality is going to be a threat to a lot of teams. You have Yusuf Poulsen as well. I'm a fan of him, but I'm not even sure if he makes the team, but I'd like to see him. Overall, Denmark have a very solid team that is greater than the sum of its parts. It's the team capable of going on a big run, and if they beat France in the group stage, I think semifinals are realistic. But that is a very tough task with a good but not really special attack. I think the team is solid, but the lack of real star power does hold them back. I don't see Australia or Tunisia tripping them up, but with a defense that's not world-class, an attack that might struggle, you could see them struggling to break down a team bunkering in, and there's a path for them to not qualify out of the group, but I think they make it relatively easily. I think they qualify second, and that will put them in a tough game against Argentina that I don't see them winning. Even if they beat France, I think the quarterfinal matchup is likely against England, and, it didn't work well for them last time. I can see Denmark going on a run, but unlike France, I don't see them threatening to win the competition. Next is Tunisia, and I'll be honest, I think they are lucky to be here. And if I'm Algeria, Egypt, or Nigeria, I am pretty mad that they made it instead of them. Tunisia struggled to even reach the World Cup in a relatively easy path, and I don't think they can field a group of 11 players who are at a top level. They will bunker down and try to not get crushed, and I will say that their defense is a strength of them. They've got a decent goal scorer in Khazri, but I don't really think they have a shot. Individually, Khazri, I think, is their top player. Decent goal scorer in Ligue 1. A decent center back in Talbi, who's another good center back there. Then you have Shekri, who's a very good defensive midfielder in the Bundesliga. Someone who could get a decent move after this World Cup. I'm expecting him to have a good tournament. And then you have a good prospect in Hannibal Mejri for Manchester United. He's on loan at Birmingham, but I don't think he'll even start for the team. And that's really mostly it. I doubt this team will be able to go far. I think they are a little bit better than Australia at the moment, but man, I guess they could bunker in, park the bus, and hope for the best. I mean, France had the curse of the champion or whatever, so maybe they'll be able to do something, but I really don't think this team's able to do well. And yet, I don't have Tunisia as the worst team in this group. We've got Australia, who is the worst Australia team we've seen at a World Cup. They are in a regression for a multitude of reasons that would sound familiar to U.S. men's national team fans. But there are still some good players coming through who can carry the torch, and some older players still there. I think Australia will bunker down and try to get a point, which, it doesn't really work for me because most of their talent is in the midfield. I don't see them as being able to grind out wins, and they don't have a great goal scorer, a pretty weak defense. Individually, Matt Ryan is pretty good in goal. Not the Premier League keeper he was, but still a good option. I went through it, and he's about like an average goalkeeper for this tournament. In defense, you have Harry Suter, who is a good defender, but he's just returning from ligament damage, and we have to see if he even makes the team first, and if he's able to recover. If he does and he's as good as he could be, like that could really help them. Maybe it takes them over the top over Tunisia, but I don't think you can count on him. Sainsbury was good last World Cup. Got moved to PSV, that really didn't work out. Now he's in Qatar, I think. I think in the midfield you've got Tom Rojak and Aaron Moy, who are two very good technical midfielders. Rojak just moved to West Brom, trying to get to the Premier League, I guess, and Moy, who kind of sold out, and now he's back at a Celtic, replacing Rojak, actually. But he's only so good. Then you've got like Hursted, Irvine, and McGree, who are decent options as well. It's a pretty good midfield, but I don't think it's going to be a strength for them. It's certainly not better than Denmark's or France's. I don't see any real goal threats in attack, and I can't see this team beating France even with a curse, and I don't see them getting the better of Denmark. This is not a good Australia team. There's no Tim Cahill. There's no Viduka, Harry Kewell, probably not even a Jedinek. Like, it's not as good of an Australia team as we've seen before, and they really need to fix their situation soon. Overall, I think this is the worst group in the tournament. France is weakened due to injuries. Denmark, they're fine, but they're only so good. And then Tunisia and Australia are both probably bottom 5 teams at this tournament. The France and Denmark game will be very fun, and it's a match I'm looking forward to. But the rest of the group will mostly be two good teams trying to break down a squad parking the bus. The winner of the group does have a very easy path to the semifinal, probably the most forgiving path to the semifinal in the tournament, and I think they do have a real shot. I think if France gets the better of Denmark, they might be able to win the tournament again, and Denmark could very easily go on a run themselves. I think those two teams are going to be very fun throughout the tournament. We have to see how France will respond. Maybe we'll have a couple of players who really break out and just turn into players who are become household names. Maybe Camavinga will really show his potential. Chouameni could as well. Then maybe Denmark could provide another great moment. You would see Dansgaard break out or something. Like, it's going to be fun to watch those two teams play. But as a whole, I think this group will mostly be a slog to cover. And yeah, that's my thoughts on Group D. Solid top right now. See ya.